Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Guests and Gusto, SCAD's virtual series of conversations and digital contents from the creators and innovators remaking culture. My name is Khoi Vo, and I'm the Vice President for SCAD. I'm actually thrilled to introduce and welcome Jimenez Lai, Alexandra Cunningham Cameron, and Nadja Swarovski to our Guests and Gustos on Commission conversation today, coming from all over the world today, actually, everyone. So it's going to be a great global conversation, I believe. I'm super excited about our conversation today. First, I really want to start by talking about really getting a closer look at how our three guests have come together to truly collaborate and to create an amazing project that was presented at the 2017 Design Miami Basel. So often we see amazing projects and we don't really consider what it takes to make it exist in the world. Oftentimes, artists and designers are thrust into the spotlight and receive the recognition for the work. However, many projects are born out of a true collaboration that takes place between multiple parties that contribute equally to its creation and ultimately to its success. And so I'm hoping that we can spend a little time discussing how the collaborative process works. And I think it's truly will be a valuable experience and conversation for our audience to gain insight into this process. The project I'm speaking about today is Jimenez Lai's immersive architectural environment that was commissioned for the Swarovski's Designer of the Future series that was shown at the Design Miami 2017. Jimenez was challenged to translate his architectural process through the medium of Swarovski crystals in a resulting installation that he created as a striking sensation of space and light. I want to talk a little bit about this amazing program called Designer of the Future. Swarovski established the Designer of the Future commission series in 2006. Each year, Swarovski commissions the next generation of talents to create installations and prototypes that fuel technology and conceptual progression in design. And the commissions are presented annually at Design Miami Basel. So real quickly, I want to introduce our guests, give a little more brief background to them. Jimenez is a Los Angeles-based architect whose work exists in the world of art and architecture and culture and education. Before founding his design studio, Bureau Spectacular, which I personally think is the most incredible name ever. And I even became more fond of it because I realized that it was inspired by a conversation with a mutual friend of ours, Michael Speaks. And by the way, he says hello, and he was very excited to hear that I was speaking with you today. Jimenez's work has worked with various international offices, including MOS and OMA. His first book, Citizens of No Place, was published by Princeton Architectural Press, and he has won numerous awards, including the Architectural League Prize for Young Architect, the Debut Award of the Lisbon Triennial, and the 2017 Designer of the Future Award at the Design Miami. So welcome, Jimenez. Thank you for being here. Alexandra is a curator of contemporary design and the Hintz secretarial scholar at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, an internationally recognized design editor and curator. She previously served as the editor-in-chief of the Miami Rail. As an independent curator, she organizes numerous public and corporate commissions and installation exhibitions all over the world. Welcome, Alexandra. Thank you for being here. We're glad
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. We're glad you're here. Nadja is a member of the executive board of Swarovski, the world's leading crystal manufacturer. Her career started in the mid-1990s when she began showcasing Swarovski's vast product range to fashion, jewelry, architecture, lighting, and home decor industry, encouraging designers to experiment with crystal's creative potential. With the generosity of Swarovski's, our very own SCAD students have had the opportunity to explore this incredible material in their work as well in the past several years. So thank you for that. In addition to serving on the executive board of Swarovski, she is also the chairperson for the Swarovski Foundation, which she established in 2013. Thank you so much for being here, Nadja. We're excited that you're here.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And after our conversation, we do have a brief moment to have questions for our panel. So please go ahead and submit your questions, and then towards the end of our conversation, we'll pick up on some of those questions. So that'd be great. I'll get us started. The three of you, I consider are truly kind of a dream team of collaborations, representing a multidisciplinary artist and designer, a well-respected contemporary curator, and a business leader, patron who truly champions the development of the next generation of designers and artists. And I think it's really key to understand the nature of these types of collaboration. It's really important to understand what each of you bring to the table, and more importantly, to understand the nature of collaboration, that sense of trust and willingness to go on a journey together. And it's a journey which you may not fully know where the destination is. So, I'll start with a quote to start off a question for you. As British artist Ryan Gander says, "No one walks away from a true collaboration triumphant or unbruised." In that sense, what do you think one has to gain or lose in order to achieve a meaningful and a successful collaboration?
Great. Who wants to start?
Who wants to take that on?
I'd love to answer that just from our point of view. I have to say it's a great quote, but I have to say, and I'm sure Alexandra feels the same coming from her point of view, failure is not an option. And we have always been very focused that the outcome is an absolute win-win-win situation. It's so important that every single party involved is able to walk away as a winner, walks away with something extra in their repertoire. Certainly from a product point of view, for us was always about pushing the boundaries of what we can do with our product. But we always felt it was totally important for the designer also to feel that he or she has just reached a new height in his or her creativity. So I have to say that's been, just from a mission point of view or vision point of view, super important. And I have to say, when I started my work, and I think also when Design Miami really started to pop up, the world wasn't necessarily thinking, first of all, in collaborations and in win-win collaborations. I think the patronship has kind of even out so much more since then. And the world has changed so much. We see it more as the norm now, but there were times when really that was not the norm. And there were times, actually, I started my career in the art world, when I remember that the dealers kept the artists very far away from the people who actually were commissioning the work. There was no dialogue there. And I think things have changed so much since then. We've come a far way.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with that. And, I have to admit that I'm not a natural collaborator. I'm an only child, a bit perfectionistic, and I've been known to be a little bit controlling. And I've really learned a lot about collaboration from the designers that I admire, that I've worked with over the years. A designer like Jermaine Barnes, who's in Miami working with communities in Allapattah, someone like Kat Holmes, who is really setting a standard for inclusive design, Enzo Mari, who, is developing products with the quality of work in mind, factory workers, and most particularly Jonah Friedman, who, funny story, recently passed, but I co-curated an exhibition with him, a large public installation in Miami, a couple of years ago. And, he's someone, he's 96 at the time, who really championed collaboration in the most authentic sense of the word. And we were installing a large public project in a plaza. It was his first in the United States. And, for a structure that people can walk in and under, we're used to having really developed plans, and, like engineers. And Jonah gave to us a printout of an iPhone photo of the site with some drawings on it and what looked like crumpled tape. And he said, make this happen. And, for the entire process, we were pulling out our hair. And he said, however the builders want to interpret this, let them do it. And once it's up, let the people use it how they want. And that's what's most important in this process. So, you know, like Jonah, I think with collaboration, it's so important to lose ego, not lose your ethic, you know, but definitely to let it go and let the process form what's going to happen.
That's great. Jimenez, yeah,
Yeah.
what's your perspective?
And I think, no, I mean, I'm still sort of tail spinning from the word bruise. I guess you said something about, you know, no one walks away unbruised. The action sort of adventure story arc, typically, you know, for a hero's journey, you know, going from the beginning to the end, you sort of don't go about the world without changing your own point of view. You're changing your own worldview. And it's the ability to, you know, go on a journey with others, go on a journey that you know, is an adventure, understanding other people's point of view that allows you to, on the one hand, reevaluate your own, on the other, combine forces so that the strengths and weaknesses of your own point of view gets complemented, and perhaps you yourself are complementing others in the process. And I think I very much like this idea because, you know, if we're only good at, I mean, if we only have certain number of hours of the day and certain interests that we, you know, spend our lifetimes, you know, dedicating towards, and we're not going to be good at everything, which is super amazing when you have an opportunity to listen to others who are good at something else. And so I find this idea of the bruised or unbruised important, because the moment from which you have to readjust your own sense of norm is a sense of, you know, maybe minor injuries that you have to absorb onto your own path in order to transform and return having changed.
And I want to build off of what you just said. It's about, I think maybe then it's about really finding support for each other, finding the strengths in each other's kind of abilities and creativity and attributes. So can you three talk about how you did that in this process with this exhibition that was created? What, you know, how did each of you find opportunities to contribute or support each other through it?
Well, I was really a mere facilitator in this project. You know, I had, I think, the funnest job of working with the jury to make a selection of designers and calling the designers cold call to let them know that they won the award. And let me tell you, like, never have I had so much fun, because the reactions were so thrilling, you know, like it really was a moment where you understood how a major commission like this with a brand like Swarovski that is known for supporting designers, but also for technological innovation, you know, that's highly sought after. So just, you know, the designers were like, oh wait, I get to go to Rottens and work with the technicians. You know, it was something that was very exciting. And so, you know, through the process of, you know, working with Swarovski to develop the brief and, you know, just being a sounding board, however possible, to try to help, you know, fill in the puzzle. I have to say that it wasn't heavy lifting for me to support a project like this. And it's a little bit different from curating an exhibition, of course. You know, there's so many different types of curatorial approaches depending on the type of relationship that's being developed.
Yeah, I have to say, when I received Alexandra's call, if I didn't know her already, I thought this was a Prince of Nigeria type of situation. So it was really, yeah, definitely a moment of shock. She totally caught me off guard in a very positive way. And I think the collaborative nature of this setup that we eventually produced in Basel, I feel like we couldn't go through the day without mentioning that it was also through a conversation with Satoshi and Marianne. Marianne Vanov, the other two winners of the Designers of the Future. We had conversations about scales of each other's work, the nature of each other's work, and maybe even the sectional and planner relationship of each other's work. I would say these were other parameters from the discussion that allowed the eventual setup to be what it was.
Yeah, and that, I mean, from our point of view, first of all, great to have that platform with Design Miami, and also be so closely connected also to.
Oops, I think we might have lost a connection.
Ooh, so sorry. Okay, I'm back. No, but you're actually very correct, Jimenez, to, for us, it was so interesting to work with two other artists besides you, and then to make sure that those artworks actually also had a good and relevant connection to each other. And I think, for us, it's always so fascinating to see that each designer receives the same brief, but it's so fascinating how different the pieces are one from another, absolutely truly expressing their personality in their work, and then it's up to us to figure out how do the pieces work with each other. And as you were saying earlier, it's so much about just respecting what one has in front of one and giving carte blanche and totally supporting that point of view and that expression. It's very personal, and therefore I think it's also very fulfilling, certainly to the viewer then, who comes and can enjoy the aesthetics of everything.
And Nadja, you've spoken about
maybe
please go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to add to this point that Nadja was making, and I also want to really compliment Nadja for building such a great team around her. So the collaborative nature. I mean, and I did mention Marianne and Satoshi, but it's maybe also really important to mention someone like Thomas Ostad, someone who works on Nadja's team, and the smoothness from which we're able to execute, our work couldn't be possible without Nadja's team. And so I think this is really important to mention.
So true, and they're so respectful and appreciative of the artist and the artist's vision. The people in the New York team and the London team, but also in particular the people in product development in Austria, they're so used to making that perfect crystal. And so for them to then give that perfect crystal into the hands of artists who are implementing the crystal ingredient within the overall other structure sometimes seems like a risk, but they are always absolutely excited and impressed with the final work. And to me, that's my favorite experience at Swarovski, our favorite relationship, that of the designers and of our product developers, totally different capabilities, but utmost respect towards each other and support of each other.
And Nadja, I'd like to unpack that a little more. You're a tour de force in collaboration. You've done some amazing collaboration with Swarovski and all these global amazing talents of artists and designers, always pushing the limits of interpretation of the use of the crystals. And there's so many talented ones, from your work with the Crystal Palace program with Greg Lin to I remember having dinner with Juju Wang in Shanghai, and she was telling me about her installation and describing that. Can you talk a little more about what you look for in designers, and how do you, which ones you want to engage with, and how do you select the next ones to champion?
Well, so obviously my mission has always been to reposition the crystal, or position the crystal truly as a creative ingredient, whether that is within the fashion industry, the jewelry industry, architecture and design, or the lighting industry. So I think what's been really important, and this was really what I learned from day one, really starting within fashion and finding this very young designer called Lee McQueen, who nobody knew, and what I appreciated from day one about him, and that's really created a blueprint for me, is his appreciation for working with various different materials. He just appreciated material. And in his case, we see so many amazing examples of him using leather or plastic or feathers or wood, but really just totally getting into the material, So when we're looking for designers, the most important thing is that they want to experiment with different materials and certainly want to experiment with crystal. And we certainly have had some experiences where I could tell, the people actually didn't appreciate crystal. And if you don't appreciate it, there's no way you can do something beautiful or effective with it. So that to me is really criteria number one, and I have to say we've been so lucky to work with amazing people who've really been able to demonstrate a use that we could have never have dreamt of. And they have really pushed our boundaries therefore. So that's what we're very appreciative of. And I have to say, I really appreciate designers and product developers, just as their education is very deep, so are they. I mean, to me, they're very thoughtful people, and obviously what they're creating, I mean, it's tactile, it lasts. So it's been an incredibly fulfilling exercise, and also fulfilling from a personal point of view or from a relationship point of view. Just as you were mentioning Greg Lynn, he's a friend forever, I've learned so much from him, and particularly also sailing, Of course, for Swarovski, he created this beautiful sail that was in Design Miami, and whenever I go to LA, I try to get on his boat with him and go sailing. It's been amazing. I feel very fortunate. And of course, with Jimenez as well, the professor, so young. Yeah, and here we have Greg's piece.
Just beautiful.
And it was certainly a challenge for us. It was about the sail, it was about the movement, it was about the light and the color. And the crystal was a very tiny, intricate element in the pattern of the sail. These sails were created by North Sail, which is one of the largest sail manufacturers for these beautiful racing yachts. And certainly a way we have never seen crystal used. And it's not that the crystal shouts in, it's not the first thing that you realize is here, but obviously when you come close to the object, you realize it plays a very crucial part in these sails in holding them all together.
Yeah, and maybe for the gearhead sort of students in the room, I've always found this project to be so astounding for other reasons. For instance, I mean, as all of you might know, Greg is a pioneer in what we understand today as digital architecture. He was a super important front runner in the way in which we are able to manipulate surfaces, understand the tools that we can describe geometry, even the resolutions of geometry that we can work with. Greg is somebody who has traversed from high res to low res throughout his career. And here in this instance of the sail, if we were just to think about that image where, he effectively articulated the control points. And the control points in this instance are the crystals. And I think that's just super smart as a way of describing the density of the surface condition. But this time, literally using dots that will glow or light up.
Yeah, and Nadja, you spoke about these traits that you look for: sense of exploration, of curiosity, the sense of wanting to be adventurous enough to explore new materials and speak in different types of medium, which I think really summarizes the work that Jimenez has been doing. And so I want to kind of talk, turn it back to hopefully I can persuade Jimenez to share some of the work. Your work has been so diverse, the way you've investigated scale, the way you draw inspiration from art and architecture, sociology, technology in your practice. Can you share some of the things that you've been working on or have worked on and kind of show us the range of things that influence you and get you excited about design?
Okay, yes, of course. I would love that. Let me just share screen. So I'll use this opportunity to contextualize some of the work that I've been doing over the years and how, some of the conceptual framework eventually allowed me to look at the crystals the way I did that when I had the opportunity. And this is Satoshi and Marian earlier when we were talking about the other two winners. The project, sort of demanded me to think about the status of the crystals, but maybe as a participant in building material. And in this case, I eventually proposed to Swarovski that we perhaps can think about the crystals as an aggregate to produce terrazzo. And luckily, through with Thomas Estad and with Zek, the London office, we were able to develop this material. In fact, I still have it here. It's with me all the time. I use it as but to contextualize the work, that I think maybe before I move on to further contextualize, the role of a designer or role of an architect today, I think as far as makers go, architects aren't on the field, hoisting lumber, pouring concrete or putting together brick and mortar. We're not contractors. The education of an architect is so that we draw to articulate what's being built. And so the medium, to say that architecture is the medium, is also beginning to become a slippery slope. The medium that we do, I think there's a wide range of mediums that we work with, from drawing to model making, which feels a lot like sculpture, to maybe even video production these days. There are a lot of different adjacent fields that we have to somehow be somewhat of, very, very fluent in very many fields, which is a very demanding task in order to allow us to communicate. And in addition to that, I think, so that's one aspect of it, right? The production that involves many mediums, but then the outcome that also has a range. So goes to saying that architects design from spoons to cities. The range that we think about could be as small as something that we hold with our hands, but to urbanism. And so it's with this spirit of spoons to cities that I've had a chance to work on a number of projects. For instance, here I had a chance to represent Taiwan at the Venice Biennale. I produced lamps, that's not exactly architecture, but then it's, I guess, proverbially the spoon. Or even installations at Museum of Modern Art, some PS1, which I'll talk about a little more, or speculative building proposals that are based on narratives and graphic novels at SF MoMA. And so I think this idea of the graphic novel has been a really important basis of the work that I do, the narrative that tells stories. And from the stories, we begin to maybe imagine possible structures that we can build. So if there's this aspect of cartoons about architecture where the medium is the cartoon and architecture is the subject matter, there were also other aspects, cartoonish architecture where the medium is architecture and cartoon is the sensibility to draw from. So from rooms that rotate once an hour, coming out of the cartoon world, to questions about our relationship with archaeology. This is a story about a future being that relooks at the early 21st century, and which led to this pavilion structure in Korea last year. A story about future archaeology, to extreme powers, answering the question of how high can we go by extruding the Central Park for 12 kilometers, being able to fit 80 million humans. But inside of the super tower, we're able to also imagine worlds where architecture inside of architecture can exist. So here we have instances of buildings inside of buildings. Just continuing on the spectrum of spoons, this is a series of furniture pieces that I had a chance to produce with the Volume Gallery last year. Continuing with the graphic sensibility of comics. Without belaboring everybody, I guess I just want to show this series of work, but then there are times that, we do these kinds of large installations where this was freshly before meeting Nadja. We had a chance to construct this piece at the Coachella Music Festival where the majority of lumber was, I guess, trashed afterwards. This was a lot of material that was constructed for a very brief period of time. It kind of called attention to the importance of reuse, reduce, recycle in this type of practice like mine, where we constantly throw away things. Which is why when we had a chance to work with PS1, I was thinking that the notion of reuse, reduce, recycle can allow us to borrow pools, hoist them, decompose them, and even the idea of reuse, reduce, recycle. Maybe there are ways from which we can think about the reuse, reduce, recycle of history that's within our field. And this was also before having a serious conversation with Alexandra about Jonah Friedman, who has always been a hero of mine. Maybe we literally construct the spatial city using found objects. And so that maybe the historical material is the found object and the material is also the found object. And the idea of the found object, I think extends beyond the historical and the material, but perhaps even the cultural. And when we had a chance to propose these speculative buildings, I think no longer are we really shy about the cultural influences, whether it's high culture or pop culture. We began to embrace all of it and inject it into the work. So I want to maybe just end by saying that this was the context right before meeting Nadja. It's the spirit of reuse, reduce, recycle, but I guess in their words, upcycling, something that's within the repertoire.
Mm-hmm.
Great, the beautiful work. Jimenez, you talked about your work being about storytelling. And I also kind of want to pivot this too, as far as Alexandra, I think curators are storytellers as well. And I remember seeing an interview you did in the past, and you talked about the responsibilities of a curator and how to create platforms for new designers. And can you talk a little bit and maybe even offer up advice as to, for the new artists, for the new designers that are coming out, what are the keys to, to success? What are the stories they should be telling?
I don't think there's any way to tell a designer what story they should be telling. I think this is something that needs to come authentically out of the type of work they want to make. I do think it is important that, designers develop a unique contribution to the world, or contributions, and so, when we think about like how to connect with opportunities to show your work, what I found over and over again to be true from curators or people like Nadja, companies like Swarovski, gallerists, journalists, is that they're interested in seeing the development of ideas, not in a polished sense, but in a way that allows for all of us, depending on what the interest is or what the project is, to get a sense of who you are. I was first introduced to Jimenez's work through his graphic novel, through his drawing, and was completely caught up in the story, the imagination, his own perspective on the world and on architecture. And, that's something that, costs resource of time and education and some labor, but it isn't expensive. And I've found that young designers have often put too much emphasis on trying to realize, like a polished product to present to someone. And I would discourage that. I would say experiment. I mean, some of my favorite works of design were made out of, trash. And what, what we're really looking for is you and your ideas. So figure out how to be able to present those with whatever resources you have, and you will definitely connect in many ways with people who are design adjacent and looking to connect.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I think it is about that connection. And I think going back, I want to continue to kind of have that theme of how to connect, because really it's about collaborating, and the three of you come from these three different perspectives on collaborating. Nadja, you know, Swarovski is obviously known throughout the world for this exquisite product, but really it's also about a sustainable product, right? And I think a lot of the work that you're doing and the idea of collaborating and taking it to different fields and perspectives is really about creating the sustainability or value to the material. Can you talk more about that and your approach to that?
Totally, and I would like to tie that in with what Alexandra was just saying. You know, it's so important that designers are expressing really their personality or their story, their message. And I think a lot of designers are certainly what we see here with Jimenez's work, and he did such a beautiful job for us, is also that story of sustainability. And all the products, the crystals that were used in the terrazzo were actually crystals that we call upcycled crystals. So those would be the crystals that have either a scratch on them or bubble in it that were slightly damaged, or let's say too damaged to put into jewelry production. So they would have gone back into the melting oven. But so in this case, they had a second life by being implemented into the terrazzo. And, you know, that entire sustainability, actually, that speaks to the customer. So I guess as an artist, to create your own story is one thing, but also the question is, how relevant is your story to the viewer in this case? We always ask ourselves the question as a jewelry manufacturer, what's relevant to the jewelry customer? And so in general, sustainability has absolutely become of relevance. We have a smaller brand called Nadja Swarovski. Sales of that are up 25% this year to date. But the thing about Nadja Swarovski, it is a sustainable brand. It is certified by the Responsible Jewelry Council, and proceeds of those collections go to the Nature Conservancy. So we're really addressing topics that have to do with the environment. We have identified the Nature Conservancy as an incredible organization that actually gives back and helps regenerate various different lands. So our projects go to the reforestation project in China and in Brazil. And, you know, we're just kind of connecting the dots. We're telling the stories, we're creating a sustainable product, and we're shedding the spotlight on those organizations which are sustainable, and clearly our customers appreciate that. And then just in terms of sustainability, Swarovski has certainly invested in, you know, research and development to become sustainable. The manufacturing plant in Wattens is sustainable. It's not a requirement of companies to be or to do that. We are a private company, so, you know, it's really very closely linked to our values. We come from a beautiful environment. We want to protect that, even if we are manufacturing. And I really hope that we can be a good role model to the industry. And then teamed up with designers like Jimenez that help express that story and express that value. You know, hopefully we can have that positive impact. But especially now, the last few months, I think, I don't know about, well, Miami, the air is always good. LA, I'm sure you are smelling better air than ever in the last 4 months. You know, certainly I was outside of London and the air smelled sweet versus bitter, you know. So I think a lot of us have just been sitting back wondering about the environment and, you know, what the impact is that we're having on it, and what we can do as organizations and as individuals to have a more positive impact.
Yeah, I would piggyback on what Nadja says in terms of, you know, designers being conscious of developing a practice that is aware of and to some degree responding to systemic inequities related to the environment, you know, related to racism, related to inclusivity, thinking about representation. You know, there is no one audience anymore. this idea of an audience no longer exists and never existed. You know, I'm speaking in commercial terms. And you know, we all want to see how designers to some degree are responding to this through different avenues. And you know, working with industry is just one aspect of a practice. Finding methods of experimentation that allow you to play with ideas, becoming a part of a community that nurtures, you know, a variety of you know, creative flights of fancy, but then bringing things back down into reality, into the world, and you know, finding ways to realize your vision is exceptionally important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this oscillation of reality, sorry, Nadja, you were about to say.
No, I absolutely agree with Alexandra.
I want to say that I think, you know, this oscillation between reality versus speculative thinking. You know, if we re-examine the history in the last maybe 100 years or so of architecture, the moments from which that extreme cases of utopic proposals are being made, these are often, let's say, meditations of contemporary societal concerns. You know, for the metabolist in Tokyo to be thinking about this relationship with the Tokyo Bay, is there an ongoing concern about the post-nuclear Japanese society? Or if we look at either Super Studio or Archizoom, both young Italians at the time were thinking about the impending doom of the end of a time period and the disasters of training so many young Italians within the societies with no opportunity to build. I think, you know, the societal concern in the hands of people who, and let's not forget Jonah Friedman's relationship with this societal concern, coming freshly out of World War II, where he was a prisoner, you know, from the Holocaust and survived it, and was able to reform his relationship with the world through an extreme version of speculative thinking, but then bringing it back down to a type of reality where the grounding of the utopias are an expression of the times. And I think about that with regards to our time right now, with what Alexandra was saying. You know, our society is undergoing rapid transformations. You know, our relationship with the systemic inequities has to change. And I think in the hands of people who are able to imagine it using our tool set, you know, I think this is maybe the time for such a newfound oscillation of our time to be made.
And I wanted to, this is great timing to add to one of our audience question. It's for Alexandra. Alexandra, Karen Smith is listening in and asks, what are you, as a curator, what are you excited about exploring next as far as the future of design exhibition and kind of talking about the current state of everything that's going on?
Mm-hmm. I've definitely been thinking a lot about the impact of exhibitions and how to develop new ways to create exhibitions that are high on the distribution of ideas and low on the creation of waste. And so that's something that I'm hoping to focus on for the next few years. We experimented a little bit with that in the exhibition that I opened at Cooper Hewitt in March, right before all of the museums closed. We worked with James Wines, one of the original partners of SITE, to recreate a framework that he had developed with his partner Allison Skye in the 1980s for the showroom of an American fashion designer, Willie Smith, that was primarily constructed from construction refuse and chain link fence and a variety of easily scavenged material. And we followed his lead, and even for this exhibition in the historic Carnegie Mansion in the Smithsonian, found ways to also reuse materials and go to salvage yards. And that's just one way. You know, I was very inspired by the Chicago Architecture Biennial and how the curators used a large portion of their budget for the exhibition to invest in community projects as opposed to building models or prototypes or installations within the cultural center. That happened. But, you know, so much of their contribution was something that wasn't seen by the audience. You know, it was felt by the communities and the local designers and architects that received infusions of funds to realize projects that they had proposed. And so, you know, I'm interested very much in these different models of curating and how, you know, as a curator, especially a curator works at a collecting institution, has a responsibility to serve the design community. And, you know, to use the resources that we are given to try to support as much as possible a variety of initiatives and, you know, promote responsible exhibition making.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. We have time for one more question, and if I may address this to Jimenez. Jimenez, as one of our listener, Melissa Yoon, is asking about, you know, she's a senior designer. What is the future of architecture? What is the future? She mentioned she's interested in hospitality, but what do you think is the future of designers in our world now? Any advice for her?
I mean, I think, you know, the idea of multidiscipline, I guess the word that was used here was multidiscipline. I mean, yes, that's true. We have to increasingly become more adept at so many means of communication. But I'm also starting to think about, you know, instead of whether or not it's more of a poly situation than a multi situation, you know, where we increasingly as designers composite the skills rather than, you know, borrow the skills or something like that. And, you know, it harkens back to the time maybe almost 80 to 100 years ago where, you know, the question of something like Bauhaus, where, you know, you do train alongside others who are also designers at different scales. Just because that happens doesn't, I mean, just because an architect is trained to become an architect doesn't mean that the architect doesn't think about furniture or doesn't think about graphic design, because the architect does think about all these things. And vice versa, I think the graphic designer is also constantly thinking about architecture. And I think this feedback loop is super important moving forward. Maybe I'm speaking abstractly right now, but you know, the word real is kind of also really important to creatively take what you have, you know, the tool set that's on and the you know, material, and being able to work within the constraints in a super creative way. I think it's the key. You know, you far too many times we post speculative things that go way out of budget. And yes, that's creative, but, you know, I think it's even more creative to be able to work within the budget that you have and do something super amazing. You know, I think that's the mark of a great designer.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I just want to thank you three for the work that you're doing. We're so excited about seeing what's next in your collaborations and your journeys and your exploration. And thank you so much for sharing your time with our students and our guests today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.